Survival isn't luck. It's a set of mastered skills. Here's 10 skills that every beginning prepper needs to learn. Number 1, food preservation. Knowing how to preserve the food that you grow or that you buy is a skill that is beyond most people in the world today. It's something that we used to know a lot about, that we used to do. When I grew up, we grew what we ate what we grew, and we canned and preserved everything. I can remember sitting on the screen porch, cutting corn off the cob to preserve. I can remember running tomatoes through the tomato mill so that we could can tomatoes and keep them all winter long. I remember the okra going into the pickling jar so that we could pickle it and have pickled okra, killing our own hogs and putting them in the salt box. You know, those days are long gone, but it's something that we need to learn again because there's no guarantee that the fragile system that we survive on is going to continue. As a matter of fact, we can look back just a few years at COVID and see the massive cracks in that fragile supply system. So mastering the art and the skills of food preservation are absolutely important. If you're interested in these skills, I have a resource that you can go and get at preparedtolive.com. As a matter of fact, I'll drop a link in the description below to the Beginner's Guide to Food Storage. If you act quickly, you can get that resource at 50% off just by following the link below. The second skill, basic first aid. There may come a time in your life where you have to be your own first responder, where you find yourself in a critical place and you need to control bleeding. You need to understand how to open an airway. Just a few years ago in the organization that I lead, we had a terrible accident happen and someone was struck in the chest and it stopped their heart. And had it not been for bystander CPR, someone trained in the skill of first aid and CPR, that person would not have made it. And it's all because someone took the time to master the skill of first aid. And you need to do the same thing at a minimum. You need CPR, first aid, and you need stop the bleed. With those skills, you can treat most basic injuries and keep people alive until you can get them to someone who has more knowledge. The third skill, water purification and sourcing. You need to know how to find water, and once you find that water, you need to know how to filter and purify that water. Having a water filter is just part of the plan. Filtration and purification are not the same things. Most water filters will not take out waterborne viruses, and knowing how to look at that water and know that if it's safe to just drink through a filter is important as well. So knowing whether to boil, whether to use purification or just simply filtration is a skill that needs to be practiced and learned, and you need to know how to do that. And it goes beyond that too, not just to know how to find water, but also how do I store water? How do I put in water catchment at my home? How can I keep the water that naturally falls on my property so that I can use it to water my garden or even survive on? It's a skill set that can easily be learned and mastered, but most people don't. And if things go sideways, they're going to be caught with their pants down without the ability to survive because we can only make it 3 days without water. The fourth skill that every prepper needs is knowing how to grow food. There's a lot more to growing food than just taking a seed and putting it in the ground. So practicing those skills now. And I know that maybe you're living in an apartment, you have a small space, you don't have a lot of land, but there are some skills you can gain just by learning to grow things in pots or in raised beds that you can apply later if things were to go sideways and there was to be a collapse of society and you had to rely on just your growing skills. So use that patio space, take off all the fancy furniture, put in some pots or some growing beds and learn to grow food. And not just vegetables, but also if you have the ability to grow some meat, learn to grow meat, add some goats, add some sheep, whatever it is that you can, even if it's just rabbits and chickens. Learning how to grow those things from egg or from baby up to harvest weight is an important skill, and it's one that will serve you well if you ever need to raise your own food to live. The fifth skill is fire starting. I know that there's all kinds of gadgets, but you know, there's a lot of people that right now you couldn't go into the woods with a lighter and actually build a fire. There is some skill, there is some art to fire building, especially in damp, wet conditions. Like today, it's about 40 degrees outside and it's raining. It's just a miserable day. And if you were in the woods and you needed to build a fire, could you build a fire in those wet conditions regardless of the equipment that you have? See, practicing building fire in windy conditions, practicing building fire in wet conditions, or when you need to conceal that fire, you need to gain those skills and learn those things so that you can survive. The seventh skill is self-defense. It's more than just going out and buying a gun. There's a lot of people that own a gun and all they're going to do is donate that gun to someone if it ever comes to a critical situation of self-defense. But getting the skills to defend yourself. How do I use that gun? How do I deploy that weapon? How do I use that blade? How do I defend myself in a hand hand-to-hand situation. Those are all things that we need to know. Listen, in the world we live in, it's paramount that we get these skills because the world is becoming more and more dangerous, and there really are no safe places for us to live and exist anymore. Enroll in a jiu-jitsu class. Enroll in a self-defense class. Go take some weapons training at your gun range. Do something to increase your self-defense skills, because heaven forbid that it comes down to you having to use those things, but it's better to have those skills and not need them than to need those skills and not have them. The ninth skill is shelter building. Taking a tarp or just the natural resources that you find around you and creating a semi-warm, dry place so that you can camp overnight, so that you can survive the elements. The survival rules of 3 say that we can live 3 days without water, but without shelter in a harsh environment, we could only live 3 hours. So knowing how to protect yourself from the elements is something that every prepper needs to know how to do. And it may not just be the end of civilization. What if you find yourself lost in the wilderness on a hike? By being able to build shelter, you can actually increase your chances to survive by insulating yourself from those outside environments. The 10th skill, cooking without electricity or gas. It is an art form to cook over an open fire. It's a skill that I think a lot of people take for granted, but even just the simple tasks of boiling water and doing things like that can be extremely difficult over an open flame. So practicing those skills, taking those opportunities, camping, and instead of using your camp stove, actually build a fire and learn to cook food over that open fire is a skill that many people don't have, and it can actually be a huge advantage to you and make you an invaluable part of your mutual assistance group or whatever survival group you find yourself part of. Carve out specific opportunities for you to learn to cook over an open flame without the use of electricity or gas. It'll benefit you greatly. These 10 skills are the beginning of your prepping journey. They're not the end all be all, but it's a good foundation, a good place for you to begin. And as you master one skill, move on to the next skill. Expand your knowledge base. Watch videos like this. Go to resources like preparedtolive.com and check out our blog and all the resources that we have there. We have some exciting things coming on board just around the corner, and we want you to be part of it. So you can go there and download any of our free resources and join our mailing list so that you get a chance to have every resource that we produce. Our goal is to create resources that allow you to be independent from the fragile systems that we're surrounded by, so that you have the skills, the knowledge, and the gear to be able to be self-sufficient. Because with self-sufficiency, there's freedom. A man who can feed himself can free himself.